The orbiters are silent now, waiting for the last awkward journey that will take them to the museums that will warehouse the grandest of our civilization's failed dreams. There will be no countdown, no pillar of flame to punch them through the atmosphere and send them whipping around the planet at orbital speeds. All of that is over. In Houston, the same silence creeps through rooms where technicians once huddled over computer screens as voices from space crackled over loudspeakers. The screens are black now, the mission control room's empty, and most of the staff have already gotten their pink slips. On the Florida coast, where rusting gantries creak in the wind and bats flutter in cavernous buildings raised for the sake of a very different kind of flight, another set of launch pads sinks slowly into their new career as post-industrial ruins. There are still rockets lifting off elsewhere, to be sure, adding to the globe's collection of satellites and orbiting space junk. The International Space Station still wheels through the sky, visited at intervals by elderly Soyuz capsules, counting down the days and the missions until its scheduled deorbiting in 2016. In America, a few big corporations have manned space projects on the drawing boards, angling for whatever federal funding survives the next few rounds of our national bankruptcy proceedings, and a few billionaires here and elsewhere are building hobby spacecraft in roughly the same spirit that inspired their Gilded Age equivalents to maintain luxury yachts and thoroughbred stables. Still, something has shifted. A tide that was expected to flow for generations and centuries to come has peaked and begun to ebb. There will still be rockets surging up from their launch pads for years or decades to come, and some few of them will have human beings on board. But the momentum is gone. It's time to start coming to terms with the winding down of the age of space. The Cold War competition between the United States and the Soviet Union was a standard contest to see which empire would outlast the other. The irony, and it's a rich one, is that the loser of that contest was pretty much guaranteed to be the winner in a broader sense. When the Soviet Union collapsed, Russia had an empire wrenched out of its hands, and as a result it was forced to give up the struggle to sustain the unsustainable. The United States kept its empire intact, and as a result it has continued that futile but obsessive fight, stripping its national economy to the bare walls in order to prop up a global military presence that will sooner or later bankrupt it completely. That's why Russia still has a functioning space program, while the United States may have trouble finding the money to launch cheap fireworks by the time its empire finally slips from its fingers. It's our decidedly mixed luck that America is entering on the downslope of its imperial decline, just as a much vaster curve has peaked and begun to arc in the same direction. That's the second reason that the space age is ending, not just for us, but for humanity. In the final analysis, space travel was simply the furthest and most characteristic offshoot of industrial civilization, and depended, as all of industrial civilization depends, on vast quantities of cheap, highly concentrated, readily accessible energy. That basic condition is coming to an end around us right now. Petroleum has already reached its global production peak as depletion rates shoot past the rate at which new fields can be found and brought online. Natural gas and coal are not far behind. The current bubble in shale gas will be over in 5 or just possibly 10 years, and despite decades of animated hand-waving, no other energy source has proven to yield anything close to the same abundance and concentration of energy at anything like the same cost. That means, as I've shown in detail, that industrial civilization will be a short-lived and self-terminating phenomenon. It doesn't mean, or at least it doesn't have to mean, that future civilizations will have to make do with an equivalent of the much simpler technological suites that civilization used before the industrial age. Um, I've argued at some length here and elsewhere that an ecotechnic society, a civilization that supports a relatively advanced technology on a modest scale, using the diffuse and limited energy provided by sustainable sources without wrecking the planet, is a live option. If not in the immediate future, then after the Dark Age, the misguided choices of the recent past have prepared for us. Still, of the thousands of potential technological projects that might appeal to the limited ambitions and even more strictly limited resources of some future ecotechnic society, space travel will rank very, very low. It's possible that the thing will be done, perhaps in the same spirit that motivated China a little while back to carry out a couple of crisp, technically capable, manned orbital flights. 10,000 years from now, putting a human being into orbit will still probably be the most unanswerable way for a civilization to announce that it's arrived. There are also useful things to be gained by lofting satellites for communication and observation purposes, and it's not at all impossible that now and then, over the centuries and millennia to come, the occasional satellite will pop up into orbit for a while, and more space junk will be added to the collection already in place. Every civilization has some sprawling vision of the future that's destined never to be fulfilled, and the dream of infinite expansion into space was ours. The fact that it didn't happen, and arguably never could have happened, takes nothing away from the grandeur of its conception, the passion, genius, and hard work that went into its pursuit, or the sacrifices made on its behalf. Some future poet or composer, perhaps, will some day gather it all up in the language of verse or music, and offer a fitting elegy to the age of space.